Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for another conversation about the important topic of housing and what we can do to improve the production of housing and to add more affordable housing to our housing stock here in the state of Rhode Island. It is my pleasure to be here again with my co-host, Secretary Pryor, who is joining us also. As you know, he's the Secretary of the Commerce RI, which is the entity that has a lot of other parts, very important parts of the economy and the housing production for the state of Rhode Island. And I'm so glad that he's here and is joining me to have this conversation. Secretary?
Great to be back with you, Lieutenant Governor Matos. Thank you so much for convening this series on housing and for being so gracious as to be my co-host and to invite me to be yours in so many forums. We're making a lot of progress in promoting dialogue in our state about the critical issues. Housing is right at the top. Lieutenant Governor, shall I proceed with some quick remarks?
Sure, go ahead.
So we know that the issue of affordability, Lieutenant Governor, is front and center for Rhode Islanders of every income level, of every purchase price level, of every rental price level. It's really hitting all Rhode Islanders. And when that happens, of course, lower income Rhode Islanders struggle the most because they're trying to find housing stock that gets squeezed out of the market. And we end up seeing increases in individuals who become homeless. So we've got to solve this problem. So production is a huge part of the challenge. The National Association of Realtors ranks Rhode Island as the third least affordable state in the country. Only New York and California are more expensive. And obviously that means that we're more expensive than our immediate neighbors, Massachusetts and Connecticut, Lieutenant Governor. And in July 2021, the median single family home sale price was $384,000. That's a 15% plus increase year over year. It's more than 15% up. Now, our state's supply is insufficient and our rate of growth of supply is insufficient. According to the Rhode Island Realtors, Rhode Island only had a 1.7 month supply of housing. It's ranked, of course, in chronological terms, 1.7 months. And a balanced real estate market is typically a 6 month supply where you have that availability for the market. We had the second lowest rental vacancy rate in the United States. Only Vermont had a lower vacancy rate. Now, we like the fact, Lieutenant Governor and all colleagues, that we have a healthy housing market. We like the fact that we have incoming purchasers from out of state. That means that we're a desirable jurisdiction. It's good for the economy, but it squeezes out people who can't afford to be squeezed out. And it creates a problem across the entire array. As to housing starts, in 2020, Rhode Island had a total of 1,374 housing starts. That's lower than how we performed in the previous decade. For example, in 2005, Rhode Island had 2,836 housing starts, more than double the figure, obviously. We're not where we need to be on production. There are a lot of contributing factors. There are factors that pertain to town jurisdictions and rules, and there are factors that relate to financing. We want to get into all of them, but on the issue of financing, we're making progress. We've talked about this, Lieutenant Governor, in previous sessions of ours on housing and in our 2030 process as well. But it bears repeating, we're making progress, but it's not enough. We're not equal to the task, not yet. We're grateful for the recent $65 million affordable housing bond, which is coupled now with the new $25 million plus housing production fund that's yielded off of the new increment on the realty transfer tax. We're so grateful to Governor McKee and to yourself, Lieutenant Governor Matos, for advocating these changes that give us a steady funding stream for the first time. And we were the only state in New England that didn't have it. But again, even in combination, this is not enough. So we want to talk about how to ever grow the resources for housing production and preservation, especially with an emphasis on affordability. I want to report on our applications for the bond, just so everyone on this Zoom and in the audience knows. The bond program, we refer to it out as the Building Homes Rhode Island program, or BHRI. That program closed for its application round last Friday. That's for the first round. And we received a near record 33 applications requesting more than $54 million in funding. That's a great thing, but it's only the first round. And we know there's going to be major developer demand. It's a good thing that there is for financing to get projects done. And we know that our production level is low and that we have such strain on our housing market. So we want to do these things. I want to thank Mike Tondra of the Office of Housing and Community Development, yes. OHCD, our director. Mike, thank you for guiding this process and accelerating it and getting projects approved quickly. And of course, Carol Ventura of Rhode Island Housing, such a critical leader and a partner in all of this. And we're thankful to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the General Assembly leadership. I want to point out Speaker Shekarchi has been magnificent in his advocacy for and his leadership around housing, and Senate President Ruggiero right alongside as an absolutely fantastic partner in creating this steady funding stream. And I will note, in also ensuring that we start to build the administrative leadership structure, Lieutenant Governor, that we need to get all this implemented and yes. to envision more and to then create programs to do more. And we'll have a new deputy secretary under the Commerce umbrella working across the entire state government and with towns and with other critical stakeholders to grow this system in terms of resources and capacity and to advance our work. So we're in the process, I want to report out that we're in the process of searching for the new deputy secretary for housing. We have posted the position, we have retained a search firm, and that search is actively underway. Finally, truly final note, American Rescue Plan dollars. Lieutenant Governor, as you have expressed, as Governor McKee has expressed, as General Assembly leadership has expressed, we need to ensure that we invest for the future using our, for the moment, abundant but truly precious American Rescue Plan dollars. We need to invest in priority areas so that we can remedy problems that exist here and now, but also invest for the future. One obvious area for investment is housing. So we hope that we can all join together, and I know we will, to advocate and to implement ARP funding for the purposes just described. So, Lieutenant Governor, there's much more to say, but thank you to our panelists and to you for your great leadership on this subject.
Thank you, Secretary. And that is so important, and I'm so glad to hear you say that. We have to make sure that we have a dedicated funding sources to help us in to mitigate the shortage of housing that we have. Our goal is we want to grow the population of the state of Rhode Island. Once we grow the population of the state of Rhode Island, we're going to be growing the economy of the state of Rhode Island. But we have to make sure that we have enough housing available for that to happen, and also for the individuals here already in the state of Rhode Island that has been suffering with the housing shortage that we have. So I'm very excited for the great panel that we have. We're having these discussions in the, we want to have all these discussions to lead to a multi-date summit that date to be determined, depends on how things develop, right? We're still in the COVID pandemic, so we're still trying to figure out what is going to be the best date for that. But all these discussions is helping us inform our decision making. And as you said, we have to thank the speaker for prioritizing housing, the Senate President also for prioritizing housing. This is a good time in the state of Rhode Island in which all the leadership is looking at the problem that we have with housing and trying to figure out the best way to address it. But in order to do that, today we actually have a great panel. We are so fortunate. We're gonna hear again. So we are bringing back Carol Ventura. She's the director of Rhode Island Housing, the executive director of Rhode Island Housing. We also have Jeannie Colla. Jeannie Colla is executive director for LISK, which is Local Initiative Support Corporation. And just as a side note, I just want to tell you, Jeannie Colla was the first person that put me in front of a microphone. So I tell you that story after. Then also we have Jennifer Hawkins from One Neighborhood Builder. She's the executive director. And Sharon Morris also is the executive director from the Omni Development Corporation. So we have great panel they're going to help us in this discussion. And now it's truly my pleasure to bring up the panelists. So we're going to start with Carol Ventura. And also just a disclaimer before we go into the presentation, for those of you, and I will say this in Spanish, that are following us would like the information in Spanish, we're not translating the information as is happening right now live, but we do have the material in Spanish and it's being posted to the Facebook chat as the panelists start doing their presentation. So I'm just going to say this in Spanish also. Si usted habla español o si su inglés es limitado, tenemos la información disponible que se va a presentar. A las diapositivas que van a ser presentadas están traducidas y la estamos poniendo en el chat ahora. Usted puede tener acceso a esta información. Si usted tiene preguntas, siéntase libre de escribir las preguntas en español y nosotros la vamos a asegurar de que sus preguntas sean contestadas. Okay? So with that, I just want to go to Carol Ventura. Carol, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm so glad that you're back here. And with this very, very important topic, and it's about the funding for affordable housing and for housing in general development. So welcome back.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor. Such a pleasure to be back with you and with my colleagues, Jeannie Cola and Sharon Morris and Jen Hawkins, to talk about one of my favorite topics. I know one of yours as well, affordable housing. And now more than ever before, we know how important a safe, affordable home is. It's been, the classroom for our children, and it's been the workplace for many people, and it remains the workplace for many folks still working remotely and not back at work. So during this brief presentation, and I'll bring up the deck, I'll introduce you to Rhode Island Housing, our purpose and the work we do, and talk a bit about the resources used in Rhode Island to support affordable housing development. So next slide. Rhode Island Housing is a self-supporting housing finance agency. And what I mean by that is we don't receive any dollars from the state to support our operations. There is an agency like Rhode Island Housing in every state in the country. We were created to ensure that residents of Rhode Island have access to safe, affordable housing and safe lending products. We provide mortgage financing and down payment assistance to help families buy their first home. And we provide funding for homeownership and rental opportunities through various financing programs that we've created or administer on behalf of the federal government and the state. During 2020, I know we'll all agree that they were challenging times. We still helped almost 1,600 families buy their first home, and we supported the development and preservation of over 1,000 affordable units. Next slide. So let's discuss what we mean when we say affordable housing. By state statute, rental housing is considered affordable if it's available to households at or below 80% of area median income, around $62,000 for a family of 3 in most areas of the state. Homeownership is considered affordable if it's available to families at or below 120% of area median income. That's around $93,000 for a 3-person household. Affordable homes are typically restricted for 30 years, but depending upon the funding, the programs that are used to develop the housing, properties can be restricted for a longer period of time, sometimes in perpetuity if we look at, for example, the Habitat model. Next slide. I mentioned that Rhode Island Housing finances both homeownership and rental opportunities. In our real estate development division, we provide financing for a range of development types. This includes funding for development on vacant lots, renovation of blighted properties, historic mill conversions, and scattered site properties, 2- and 3-family, multifamily properties that we use to create affordable rental homes. In addition to funding the new production of affordable homes, we also focus our resources in ensuring that the inventory we have today remains affordable moving forward. We have around 37,000 affordable homes across the state. Many of the apartments have expiring affordability restrictions, which means it's imperative that we prioritize preservation financing for these developments to ensure the homes remain affordable for the future. We do have developers that we work with that create affordable homeownership opportunities. I previously mentioned Habitat, but also Sharon Morris and Jennifer Hawkins. Both organizations have created affordable single-family homes in the past, and they continue to do that good work. Most importantly, we finance the construction and rehab of serviced enriched housing for special needs groups, including our veterans and disabled individuals and folks who are experiencing homelessness. Next slide, please. This is a typical example of the financing structure of an affordable rental development. It's a snapshot of the financing sources used to acquire and renovate Ashton Village in Cumberland, which involved the renovation of historic buildings, 53 apartments in historic buildings. You'll note that it took 10 financing sources to raise the capital needed to renovate these properties. And unfortunately, many of the sources require separate funding applications, all due at different times throughout the year, which leads to much work by the developer and significant delays in the start of a project. Next slide. Much of the work we do in Rhode Island is financed through programs created on a national level through the U.S. Departments of HUD and Treasury. I've listed a few of the programs that Rhode Island Housing administers, including the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which is the most robust tool we have in Rhode Island to finance affordable apartments. It's a scarce resource, so unfortunately, we're only able to finance around 3 housing developments annually with this source. We also administer the Home Program and the Housing Trust Fund. The Trust Fund helps us to develop deeply subsidized apartments for individuals and families at or below 30% of area median income. Most all of our newly financed supportive housing developments utilize this resource. We use Treasury's Capital Magnet Fund to preserve our expiring developments, and we can thank Senator Reed for both the Housing Trust and Capital Magnet Funds. He was instrumental in ensuring both programs were funded nationally. The Continuum Care Program is an $8 million program that provides assistance, including limited capital dollars, very limited capital dollars, rental assistance, and leasing funds to house families experiencing homelessness. Unfortunately, the program is not providing much in the way of new funding for Rhode Island, but it is a key resource to continue the important homeless programs our partners have created over the past 2 decades. And of course, our lead hazard reduction program that helps families across the state make their properties lead safe. Next slide. As you heard from the Secretary, one of the primary sources of state funding used to develop affordable homes has been the housing bonds. Rhode Island voters have approved 4 housing bonds beginning in 2006. The past 3 bonds have produced and preserved more than 3,000 affordable homes. And I have to say that again, more than 3,000 affordable homes. And so in collaboration with the HRC, we recently completed the RFP. And as the Secretary mentioned, over $50 million in requests for these resources. Next slide. This is a summary of a few of the programs that we fund, and generally these resources fill the gaps between what can be financed through federal and state programs and what the needs are of our residents. For example, we provide critical funding early in the development planning process through our pre-development loan program. And to complement that program, we'll also acquire and hold property on behalf of a developer through our land bank program. And this is all while they're working to assemble their project financing and receive their permitting on the local level. Capacity building in our nonprofit development sector is important to us. And we partner with Jeannie Kohler and her team at LISK to provide funding for the NDF program. Next slide. Finally, let me touch on a few of the challenges and opportunities surrounding affordable housing. As you might imagine, raising the capital necessary to buy and build affordable housing is challenging. You recall the funding stack for Ashton Village in Cumberland. And that's just one example of the many developments that come through our doors. Developing homes for the most in-need residents of Rhode Island, those that are at the very lowest of incomes, means that we need rental subsidies or operating support for these apartments. And there's just inadequate funding for these subsidies locally and on a national level. But we also have tremendous opportunities in Rhode Island to advance affordable housing. Strong advocacy by our partners and leadership at the federal and certainly the state level, Lieutenant Governor and you and Governor McKee providing us the resources we need to create affordable housing opportunities for all Rhode Islanders, and truly recognition that safe, affordable housing improves the health and the economic mobility of all of our residents. So thank you. I'll pause there and answer questions if you like, or hold.
Thank you, Carol, for this important information. So we're going to bring over Jeannie also, Jeannie Cola, and we're going to give Jeannie the opportunity to do her presentation. Hi, Jeannie. So good to see you.
See you too.
And then after Jeannie's presentation, then we're going to have a discussion before moving on to the presentation from Sharon and Jennifer. So let's start with Jeannie's presentation now.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Pryor. I am very excited to be here, and I too want to say special thanks to, Secretary Speaker Sakarchi and Senate President Ruggiero and all of the leadership within our state that recognizes housing as a critical need and a critical and this being the critical opportunity for investment. So I want to thank everybody for that, and also a special thanks, as the Secretary did shout it out, to Mike Tundra and the Office of Housing and Community Development. I know they care deeply about the issue and work tirelessly to provide resources to make things happen. So thank you for having me here today. As the Lieutenant Governor said, I'm Jeannie Cola, the Director of the Local Initiative Support Corporation here in Rhode Island, and you can move on to the next slide. So in Rhode Island, we're the largest CDFI in this market, and we are focused on broad-based community development initiatives. We bring national, state, and local resources together to invest in local communities. So we do this, again, to the right of the slide. We secure local funding, we unlock additional resources, and we target specific local investment opportunities. You can move to the next slide, please. All of this works because we have partner organizations. Our model is up on the screen, but we could not do this work without the capacity of our local community-based organizations, without local governments, without state governments, and without individuals at the local grassroots level that help us formulate strategies to move an agenda forward within a community as it relates to housing. Next slide, please. So why is LISK important in Rhode Island? Why are we important to the work? And why is the connectivity with all of our partners important? Because each of us, I think, have a certain role to play. And since LISK opened in 1991, we're a 30-year based Rhode Island organization. We have invested approximately $437 million, leveraging an additional $1.5 billion in resources. That touches about 8,800 homes. It touches 2.5 million square feet of commercial and community space in our neighborhoods. And in 2020, you can see some of the pandemic pivot that was done. We invested a little bit over $13 million into the state, which was, incredibly important. And then some investment examples at the end there, which include $12.2 million to build the new federally qualified health center in Central Falls, which is a huge community asset to the northern part of the state. $7 million in training and services for reentry populations that was received at the national level, that we were able to secure a portion of those resources in Rhode Island to provide workforce training through our financial opportunity centers. And we also did $9 million for the Branch Street revitalization, which was a tax credit equity investment. So a lot of different strategies, a lot of different examples that lead to investment in Rhode Island. And you can move on to the next slide. So I think, what is the current housing landscape? I think Senator Pryor, Secretary Pryor articulated it very well. I think it was reinforced by Carol at Rhode Island Housing. But I think it's somewhat worth repeating that our current rate of investment does not scratch the surface of what's needed. We have different resources that are available. One of the things is the low-income housing tax credit. That resource, we are actively pursuing a policy change to increase the formula, which could provide us additional resources, allowing for more projects to be developed in a given year. So that's exciting. And, we've got the housing bond, which is so exciting. And you saw Carol provide a slide that talked about over the past few bond issuances, what we were able to do, and 3,000 units of housing. I'm going to do just a little happy dance because that is incredible. 3,000 units of affordable housing preserved or created is just a tremendous outcome for the state of Rhode Island. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk to some of the points I think that Secretary Pryor made, which, according to the Rhode Island Realtors, we're the third least affordable in the country, behind New York and California, little old Rhode Island. The third least affordable doesn't seem okay, right? We got to figure out ways to address that. The supply, as Secretary Price said, is way insufficient, and we've got to figure out ways to address that. But the process is complex. I think Carol, illustrated the process quite clearly when we saw the slide of the house and the 10 different funding sources that it required to get this development through, conception to construction. We've got to figure out ways to lessen the complexity and allow things to speed up and move faster. That's how we're going to get where we want to go. So a couple of things I think worth noting. And on the next slide, I thought it would be very helpful to kind of show some photographs of what affordable housing looks like in our state, what community development investment looks like in our state, because you can take any one of these photos. The top left is an example of senior housing. The top middle is a rental project. The top right is an affordable homeownership townhouse style. Again, bottom left, rental. We have in the bottom middle, we have a mixed use project where we have Urban Greens coming in as a supermarket to address a food desert in conjunction with housing. And then we have the Blackstone Valley Health Center in Central Falls on the bottom right. So there's a lot of different types of investment that gets done in our state, but this is what it looks like. It's beautiful. It fits in with the aesthetic. It's places I certainly would want to live. So the perception, I think, is something that we need to overcome and we need to work through, and we need to figure out best practices and best ways to do that, because affordable housing creates opportunity. So, and on the last slide, that again, this project here is a family that lives in these rental apartments behind, and another beautiful example of housing in Rhode Island. But housing is a critical need. It is a foundational social determinant of health and all other areas, including job security, educational attainment for kids. It is critical. Our ability to attract, as one of the presenters prior to me stated, it's critical to attract a workforce. We have to have places for people to live. And although the financial resources are limited, I do believe there are things we can do to think differently about the work. How do we engage business community to provide employer-assisted housing opportunities? How do we provide different types of opportunities to support not only the creation and the preservation of units, but to support the individuals and the people living in those units as well, and creating different types of solutions and activities. So that is my last slide. I think I made the time.
Thank you.
I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you so much. So I know we bring Secretary Pryor and also Carol Ventura back. This was very informative presentation you both have provided. One of the things that I'm always asked, like, when you're talking about housing, what is the role that LISK play? And based on my experience in Omniville, LISK has been crucial, very crucial on making sure that we develop housing and we develop community, and supporting also the different CDC, the Community Development Corporation, because besides the housing, we need all the supports around it. So I want to thank you, Jeannie, for that presentation. But Carol, you showed us, that was a great visual of all the funding that is needed to develop housing. Thank you for doing that. And that was one of the questions that we had. But I just wanted to ask you right now, what do you think is the biggest obstacles that we have to getting the distributions of those funds?
So as I mentioned, Lieutenant Governor, some of it is about the timing, right? The timing of when the resources become available. You notice that there were several funds in the Ashton Village development that were federal resources that aren't controlled at a local level, right? So that means more applications that Valley Affordable Housing, Peter Bouchard, had to fill out, his whole team. So I think timing of funding availability, and certainly competition. When you think about this bond round and more than $50 million in requests, that speaks to the competition for these resources, right? Yeah. So there's some of that. And some of it is community opposition, right? And that's why we work so hard, Jeannie and I and all of the folks that work in housing, we work so hard to celebrate every single development that's completed, because we want to be able to show everyone in Rhode Island, this is the face of affordable housing, right? It's the families that live and work in our communities, right? So I think all of that comes together to make it a difficult job for folks like Jennifer and Sharon, and I certainly compliment them on the great work that they do every day.
Thank you. And Secretary, we have to bring Kim Ahern to the conversation. Yes. She has great information about the work that the Office of the Governor McKee has been doing in the area of housing. So welcome, Kim, to the conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor, and thanks, Secretary Pryor. Appreciate it.
So glad to have you. Thank you for your skilled and heavy duty work on the subject, Kim.
So Secretary, you have a question for the panelists right now?
I do. The question of the complexity of the funding system always comes up. Mm-hmm. We fully acknowledge it. And Jeannie, with your national perspective as the LISK head for a national organization, LISK, that is renowned for its work in this field, you know this. Carol and Kim, you know this because of your global perspective from right here in Rhode Island. Every place experiences this, which is to say, building affordable housing by definition requires subsidy. You're writing down the price points in the market by subsidizing. There are other factors, but there is subsidy, whether it's a land contribution or whether it's direct dollars. That's what you need to do. And it's a patchwork. So what Carol displayed, I agree with the Lieutenant Governor, that's such a useful way to take a look at it. So a developer needs to be this skilled practitioner, Lieutenant Governor, who knits together LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, home funds, maybe it's a historic structure, so historic tax credits. Then there's the BHRI Rhode Island bond. Now we have a new funding stream. It's a patchwork. So where I'm going with this question is, some of this I think is inevitable. I put that out as a draft thought. Please push back on it. But what is not inevitable, and what can we do to make this simpler? Jeannie, Carol, Kim, any initial thoughts?
So I'll say, I do think Carol brought up the topic of timing. So I wonder if there's a way to look at all of the funding sources relative to all of the timing cycles to do the best job we can to align those with perhaps one application or fewer applications for funding that can be reviewed. That will allow, I think, for a review of these applications more timely. I think they can be less complex. So I do think that is one thing that potentially could be done locally.
Yeah, and I think we have just recently launched a OneStop application, and that was at the request of some of our nonprofit development partners. So we put together the OneStop. We're testing it right now with our homeowner investment fund, and we will roll it out as part of the next tax credit round. So not only will folks apply for tax credits, but also other federal and state resources that are available to roll up as part of that application. So I think we're on the right track, and we hear you, Secretary. We know that it is challenging for folks to fill out these multiple applications, and it just delays, right, the start of construction, and we want construction to move in Rhode Island. So I think we're on the right path.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to ask, Kim, are you able to tell us some of the initiatives that the governor's office, Governor McKee's office is working on when it comes to funding for housing?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And thank you, Secretary Pryor, and to our panelists, both present and our future panelists. I really am just thankful to be with you all who are the true experts. And I know I talk to many of you regularly and really rely on your expertise. And just wanted to thank you for having me. So first, I wanted to say on behalf of the governor, obviously, this is a top priority for him. And you've heard throughout this panel already just the collaboration and partnership that's taking place in this building right now with respect to Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Pryor, the Speaker, Senate President. It is truly, I think, a moment where just everyone is totally focused on this, from both issues of homelessness to unsheltered individuals to building more affordable housing. And so I just wanted to remark on that at the outset. Our office, and the governor in particular, prioritize housing in several different ways, starting first with his first budget, right, that he introduced at day 10 into office, as he would point out if he was on here, which was the FY22 budget, which we've already heard a little bit about, but it was really his first chance to show his commitment to this, and including in it the permanent funding stream to build affordable housing, which we've already noted is unique, that we've stood out in the country. And so we were thrilled that was incorporated in the final budget, and that he was able to actually sign that as well. So that would be one thing I would point out. Secretary Pryor has already noted that the importance of having a Deputy Secretary of Housing as well. In addition to those budget tools, I think the bond funding. Oh, I think it's hard. Is it a little hard to hear me? 1 second. Let me.
Yeah, can I just suggest, if anyone is not muted, please mute while Kim is speaking. That will help. And Kim, your audio level was partly eclipsed by that.
Great. So why don't we just bring the rest of the panelists? So I want to ask Jeannie and Carol to please stay to the end, so when all of us can have a joint conversation. But I think that it's important for us to bring the voice of Jennifer and Sharon, because they are right there on the front line doing the work. So we need to hear from them. So what do you think, Secretary?
I'm right with you. Let's hear from these very talented developers who manage to produce in the midst of this complexity.
Thank you. So why don't we bring Jennifer and Sharon, and Jennifer is going to do her presentation first. Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Matos and Secretary Pryor, for inviting me to participate in this panel. And I'm thrilled to be partnering with Sharon in the wisdom that she can offer. So I am Executive Director of One Neighborhood Builders. We are a community development corporation based in Providence. And our mission and our byline here at the end of my PowerPoint says it. It's really working at the nexus of health and housing. building opportunity through homes and health. And as Jeannie very well stated, that housing is a key social determinant of health. In fact, the life expectancy rate, if you live in the only neighborhood of Providence, for example, is 9 years less than if you live in more affluent neighborhoods of Providence, or Providence as a whole compared to the suburban regions of the state. So, 74 versus 83. And that, I think, is unconscionable, and it really drives our work. So you can go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to breeze through these slides. This is just an example of our most recently completed development, King Street Commons, which had funding from Rhode Island LISK, Rhode Island Housing, BHRI. That capital stack that you just saw is exactly what we needed to do to complete this project. And that's an image of before a blighted land that is now home to 30 apartments. In fact, the land was so blighted and dangerous, the street, King Street, was closed with Jersey barriers. And if you look on Google Satellite, you'll still probably see those Jersey barriers cutting off the street because it was so dangerous. The Providence Housing Authority development is at the end of one of those streets, and the 330 families who live there could not go to Riverside Park. They had to go around the whole city to get to the park because of this dangerous area that is now this gorgeous community. You can go to the next slide, please. So this development is a $17.5 million development, included the construction of 30 new affordable apartments, as well as the preservation of 32 apartments in the Elmwood neighborhood, and then the construction of 4 Head Start classrooms for children's rent. We talk a lot about the 3 sort of P's of housing: production, preservation, and protection. So this development really hit those 2. We're producing new apartments, but we're also preserving apartments. And if we don't do that, it's a zero-sum game. It's really crucial that we have sources to not only add to our housing stock, but ensure that our existing housing stock remains affordable and remains of high quality. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is Sheridan Small Homes, which is contiguous to King Street Commons. Many of you on the call were at our ribbon cutting back in July, and thank you for participating in that. And so Sheridan Small Homes, again, this is a before picture. It was an environmentally contaminated site that we cleaned up, and this is an after image. Sheridan Small Homes is our first, you can go to the next slide, actually, please. Is the first example of a deed restricted passive house certified development in this state. It is the sort of highest caliber of a green building. It's zero energy homes. In fact, we're going to be contributing. It's a net positive development contributing to the grid. 750 square feet, 2 beds, 1.5 bathrooms. So these are, I bristle at the word tiny because it's really not tiny, it's small. They are genuine homes, and in fact, are more akin to the starter homes of a couple generations ago. It's kind of post-war simple ranches that my grandparents lived in. And that's what we're really not building anymore. And I think we do need to get back to that. These were clustered on 3/4 of an acre of land and positioned to maximize the solar gain. $145,000 sales price makes that very affordable to a low moderate income buyer. Should note, they were $340,000 a piece to build. And that's with some concessions that we had on labor and land. So building homes is expensive, and we can't get around that fact. And so it is crucial that we have that subsidy to bridge what a low income family can afford and what it reasonably costs to build quality products. And that's why the funding sources that we're all talking about are so essential. You can go to the next slide, please. So the third P of produce, preserve, and protect is, this is an example of that. This is our first foray outside of the city of Providence into East Providence. It is Sutton Place. It's 36 units of naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. You often hear that term. So these are apartments that are they were not deed restricted, but low, moderate income residents have been leasing them. The property was put up for sale, and had a for-profit developer purchase these units, they could very well have made considerable renovations and then tripled the rents that were being charged. This is, as the crow flies, maybe a half mile from the east side of Providence, and a very desirable area. And if we're not protecting this naturally occurring affordable housing, then that can lead to displacing of residents and gentrification of neighborhoods. So it's really crucial that we invest in protection of these naturally occurring affordable housing projects. And I would like to note that by doing so, East Providence will become the 7th state in Rhode Island to achieve their 10% LMI goal, which we're really proud of participating in. You go to the next slide, please. You can actually breeze right through that one and go to the last slide. But that, I think, not to belabor the point that Carol and Jeannie, and I imagine that Sharon will also be making, that it takes a numerable number of resources to complete these projects. And I would say that the theme that we're hearing here today is expediency. Time is money, but time is also lives, right? There are individuals who are exceptionally housing cost burden, are living in unsafe housing. And we've got to get faster. We've got to figure out how we can develop housing with greater expediency. I am thrilled to hear Carol say that there's a one-stop application coming online. That is my top recommendation. And I would encourage us to think about first and only sources. I was very pleased to hear Secretary Pryor mention that ARPA funds should be dedicated to housing. The housing community has recently rallied around a request of $500 million for housing. And if we can think about using that source and other sources as first and only, it really allows us to bring housing to market faster. Increasing the capacity at state and municipal agencies. It takes a lot of state agencies to issue permits, to do the inspections, Department of Environmental Management, National Grid, Narragansett Bay Commission, et cetera. These agencies are doing a lot of work, and they need added capacity in order to meet the supply. And an acquisition line of credit. The last project I mentioned in East Providence, we were able to purchase that. We were able to get an acquisition loan from Rhode Island Housing, but we had a very patient seller. That is often not the case. And we have to be able to close on products fast. That's 30 days. That's not 9 months. And having a pre-approved acquisition line of credit allows us to compete and protect those really important properties. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that presentation. And we want to hear now from Sharon Morris. She's the Executive Director for Omni Development Corporation. We want to hear Sharon, and then after we're going to bring everyone back for the final conversation. So Sharon, thank you so much for being here, for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this very important conversation on affordable housing in the state of Rhode Island. You can go to the next slide. Over the past 3 decades, Omni Development Corporation, a nonprofit community housing development corporation, has been developing affordable housing in the state of Rhode Island, and we have developed over 1,200 units of affordable housing throughout the state of Rhode Island. And we pride ourselves on providing housing to those individuals who might not otherwise be able to find a home. So we focus on housing from families, elderly, disabled, veterans, and the homeless. So we're very happy with the services that we provide to our community. Omni's approach, we try to focus on, we call our values the 3 C's. We focus on the cultural backgrounds of the families in the cultural and diverse neighborhoods that we develop in. We encourage our residents, and we want our developments to be part of an asset in the communities that we serve. We don't like to just developing neighborhoods. We like to develop and enhance and increase the value in the communities that we serve. And when we go through the slides, you will see some of the investments that we've made throughout the state of Rhode Island. And lastly, Omni is committed to the work that we do in the communities and the people that we serve. As someone who grew up in the South Providence most of my life for 46 years, I've lived by these developments. So I really understand the importance of the work that Omni does and the role that it tries to play in the community. So as I go out and I reach out to the community, I want to be an asset and want to be a partner in these neighborhoods. And that's why Omni really prides itself on doing whatever we need to do to develop and to create housing in the neighborhoods. And that sometimes means that you have to change the way you think. You have to adjust to what's needed in the community at the time. So we're very flexible, and we will continue to adapt as necessary to respond to the needs of the community. You can move to the next slide, please. Omni has a very diverse portfolio, and in our early days, we were known for redeveloping underperforming properties throughout the state of Rhode Island. Omni, we were very pleased that we've acquired 3 developments back in 2003. It was 3 elderly developments that were low-performing developments. And when we acquired those properties in 2003, we spent about $18 million in redevelopment of those units over 15 years ago. And like Carol said, a lot of the properties in the state are aging. And in 2019, we refinanced those developments, ensuring affordability for those families that live there. We preserved those units, 354 units. We preserved those units, and we invested an additional $17 million into those units. And we completed that back in March of 2021. So 354 units for elderly, handicapped, and disabled families. And we totally rehab 18 units, making those fully ADA compliant. So Omni knows the importance of making sure families have a safe place, regardless. I saw someone in the chat mention, what about older people aging in place? That's also one of the populations that we serve. We have 5 elderly developments in our portfolio. Omni also, and the Whitmarsh building, which is in the historic part of Elmwood, Omni acquired this property in the early 2000s. This was a 16-unit development, one of the oldest apartment buildings in the state. And we acquired that property, and we transformed that property from a once burnt out crack house to a very desirable community in the Elmwood area. So these 16 units was restored. It's a historic property. It was restored. And again, it's one of our most desired apartments. And we have a lot of long-term residents that reside at this development. So we're very proud of the product that we develop and in the communities that we serve. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight something. While it may not be a Rhode Island property, it just goes to show you the creativity that Omni tries to develop when we create our projects. This property, as you can see, the top picture was what the property was when we acquired it. And the bottom picture is what we transformed, this 14-acre property in Waterbury, Connecticut. It was Connecticut's only African-American co-op that we totally transformed into 122 units of affordable housing in the state of Connecticut. And this, again, opportunity allowed Omni to preserve the rich culture in this community by redeveloping and providing individuals in this housing development a nice, safe, decent, and affordable place to live. Can you move to the next slide, please? Omni, as Carol spoke, the home ownership is another issue for low-income families. And Omni has developed rental units as well as home ownership units throughout the state. And this Nehemiah houses, which consist of 44 homes that we built South Providence and in Federal Hill. Not many people think of affordable housing in Federal Hill. Omni, once again, under the leadership of our former executive director, Joe Caffey, he wanted people to understand that while we're building affordable homes, Omni's not about creating ghettos. We want to go into the neighborhoods. We want to preserve them. We want to restore them back to a desirable neighborhood, like Jen said, that anyone would like to live in, not just people who are low income, but people who may make 80 or 120% AMI. So this is something that Omni, we went into this neighborhood, abandoned lots, we demolished them, we rebuilt them. And this was when the city of Providence provided affordable lots. This is when you can buy a lot for $1 and $5,000, but now the lots are a lot more expensive to acquire. But this is some of the creativity that developers of affordable housing try to develop in the projects that we build. And as you go through the neighborhoods, you would never know that these are affordable homes. They've been there for over 20 years. And we plan to continue to develop more affordable home ownership opportunities for the residents that live in our developments that we hope will be transitioning out. So that's something that we're trying to focus on as we move our organization forward. Can you change the next slide, please? This is Omni's future project, creating successful communities, we call it, right? Omni, we're always trying to do something better than we've done before. So this project was part of a multi-year development community engagement process led by Rhode Island Housing. The former development, which is on the lower slide, was 74 units that were abandoned and foreclosed on by HUD. Omni is looking forward to redevelop the community with the building that you see at top, as well as existing properties throughout the neighborhood. So one of Omni's guiding principles in anything that we do, we try to create successful communities. We want to get the neighbors involved, the public involved in the developments that we develop in the neighborhood. And this project is a true testament of doing what Omni does best, working with the community and the stakeholders to develop a project that everyone can be proud of. Omni is about partnerships. That's something that I'm very committed to. If a developer approaches me and says they have a project in the neighborhood, I might not be your development partner, but I sure would like to be the person that could go with you to speak to the community, to get the community to buy in to your initiative if it's going to help the same people that we're trying to serve. So I'm trying to change the face of being competitive in this affordable housing space. I want to be a community partner, and like they say, by any means necessary, that's what I'm willing to do to bring housing to the people that need it. And you can go on to the next slide. Omni's mission is to preserve and to be a steward of affordable rental housing. Our goal will always be to provide stability, hope, and economic security to low and moderate individuals and families. And so I say that with the resources that I feel we need to continue this work. As Jen said, we need flexibility in funding. BHRI, you guys are the administrators of the state bond. We have some projects that are ready to go in 6 months. And so we should have like a fast response program for projects that are ready to go to get these units on the streets so families can move in. We call it heads on beds, right? We want to get those heads on beds as quickly as possible. So that should be something that we consider. While we may have those other projects that need pre-development money, that need money to be able to develop the projects and are still in its beginning stages of development. Because these projects do cost a lot of money. You have to spend a lot of money before you can even submit an application. And not all organizations have that capacity. So we need to meet people where they are. Like Jen stated, we need a streamlined process, so those are some of the flexibility ideas that I would like to share with the group. And then also BHRI may want to consider providing BHRI only funded development, so we don't have to wait on all those different capital stocks that Carol and Jeannie showed, all these different revenue and funding sources that we have to wait for. We apply for one, then we have to wait to see if we get the other funding to be able to develop a project. But if BHRI had a fund that was set aside specifically for standalone projects, you may see an increase in homes and apartments being developed in the state. This will allow us to increase the number of units in the state of Rhode Island. And then the last two is pretty much just trying to align the housing applications that the state of Rhode Island has through BHRI, Rhode Island Housing. You know, you have the housing investment application, which Carol, I give you kudos because that I was looking over it. That's a great application. And I think it's moving us in the right direction. But that application is different from the tax credit application. That application is, so every application may have different requirements. The comprehensive community development section on the Rhode Island Housing application should be the same as BHRI because we still want to make sure that all the housing developments that we provide are quality, they're energy efficient, people that are moving there, they're moving there and they're going to save money and all their money is not going to be spent on electricity and fuel. So there's certain things that we can do to work to tie up some loose ends so that developers won't be frustrated when we should be excited when we're submitting these applications, right? So we want to continue that enthusiasm while we're stressing over the submission deadlines that we're faced with from time to time. And then lastly, I think it's also important for all of the agencies that provide housing resources to be consistent with the total development costs. We know how much it costs to develop a house, an apartment, multi-unit building, a 40-unit building. We know how much it costs. We have the data. Everyone should get together and we should just have one set of, the Rhode Island TDC, the total development cost per unit. Everyone shouldn't have a different guideline. If you want us to be ready to deliver, we just ask for some consistency in the programs that are being administered from the various agencies. And again, I thank all of you who are committed to this initiative, the resources that are being provided. We're very appreciative. But of course, we always want more, I'll be honest, but we'll take what we can get now and then hopefully we'll see an increase under this new leadership. Thank you all.
Lieutenant Governor, if I may, I just want to highlight something that I think is so critically important, and that is this work is about all of us. It's not about one of us, and it takes all of us in order to move it forward. And so we need to be innovative, we need to be thoughtful, and we need to be willing to make the changes and improvements necessary in order to do more and to keep moving forward. So
thank you, Jeannie. And I have to say, Sharon, thank you so much for your presentation. And if I can ask the team that have the slide, if you can go back to the slide that Sharon had in which talk about the new project that's going to be called Joseph Cafe. I mean, we should pause there and just say thank you and honoring Joe Cafe in this way. And in changing that name that this property had that was so negative connotation attached to it, and just renaming that project to honor the memory of Joe Cafe. I just want to say thank you, because this is, we should be doing this more often. Joe Cafe, I remember early on when I started in the Providence City Council, and it was always a pleasure to be in a meeting with him. And he was always so kind and so, and have a spirit of collaboration. And I want to say also, Sharon, thank you for what you said about, and this is something that we've been talking a lot, is how can we work in collaboration and understand that we cannot be fighting about who owns the problem. We should all be working about finding solutions and all share part on finding the solution. So thank you so much, Sharon, for that. So with that, I'm just gonna turn it over to my co-host, Secretary Pryor.
Thank you, Lieutenant
I want to get your
Governor.
reaction.
Much appreciated. I have to say, this has been such an invaluable session. What we've heard in concrete terms linked to specific projects that have gotten done right here in our midst in Rhode Island is how challenging it can be to put them together, but how the resources are increasing. And we need to ever simplify and synchronize our processes, keep moving along those lines. We're making progress thanks to Carol and Mike and so many others. And we need to increase the resources. Ms. Morris said it best at the end. We always ask for more. We are ever seeking more. And Sharon, you're right. So are we. We in government are unified with you in the spirit that Ms. Cola expressed. Jeannie said, we're all working together. It's going to take all of us. It sure is. And with Governor McKee and Lieutenant Governor Matos, we are making this a massive priority along with Speaker Shekarchi and Senate President Ruggiero. It just couldn't be a higher priority. Now we need to use that emphasis to our advantage to move these processes and gather more resources. So Lieutenant Governor, I think we're drawing to a close, but what I wanted to ask Sharon and or Jennifer was, we've heard about the challenges, we've heard about the complexity, and goodness gracious, we agree, and let's plow into that. Would you want to highlight, to bring us to a conclusion, a bright light, a thing that has gone well, a turn of events that's been positive, that shows that Rhode Island can get it done? Anything that you choose, a person, a project, someone on your team, someone in government, an evolution of a process, Sharon or Jennifer?
I could offer that. I have to say that the Providence Planning Department is terrific to work with. They've got really progressive zoning ordinances and just a really committed team that is thinking creatively around this. So I want to applaud their work.
Hear, hear. Wonderful.
And then I would just comment on the collaboration and the support that was provided during what we're receiving now for the Joseph Caffey Apartments. That's a bear. That project is a very complex project, and we're trying to be creative partnerships. So that means the city, the state, LISK, anyone that has something to offer. I am not shy, and I do contact everyone because we want to see this project. We want to see the shovel in the ground and getting this demoed and having the construction starting by early spring. So
we're grateful that you do, Sharon.
We're very excited about that. So I want to thank everyone for their efforts with helping us get this far in the process.
Thank you, Jennifer and Sharon and Jeannie, for all of your leadership, all of your persistence in getting these projects done, and for ever informing us of what we need to do more. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for an absolutely marvelous session that really helps to move the ball and improve our understanding of the scene.
Thank you, Secretary. And I just want to say, we have to continue this type of conversations. We have to continue to highlight the positive things that we are doing to solve the problems of the crisis that we're facing. We have to take time in connect with one another and learn from what someone else is doing that maybe we can also replicate. We don't have to recreate the wheel every single time. So let's find more ways in which we can collaborate. So I really want to thank all of you for participating. But before we go, I just want to know if any of you have something burning that you want to say that you didn't get to. I'll give you that chance. Kim?
Governor, if I can, I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No, go ahead. We still have time.
Had some mic issues and there was background noise. So I just wanted to apologize to the panel and say again, how grateful I am, Jeff, for this today and how much we appreciate everyone's partnership. I think you're spot on to say that this really truly does take a community. I also just wanted to say thank you to Jen for recognizing the importance of obviously the American Rescue Plan. And I think that's the only other thing I would note on behalf of the governor is obviously his budget and bond funding are ways in which we kind of demonstrate our priorities to this. But I'd be remiss if I didn't note, obviously this pandemic has revealed, significant challenges that we've discussed here today, including lack of affordable housing and barriers, economic vulnerabilities. And I think it's brought a renewed focus to that. And the state is committed to finding solutions to ensure a more equitable and prosperous future for all, including housing solutions. And so I really do appreciate Jen you pointing that out. And I know that the state leadership and the governor in particular is committed to doing that with these dollars. So thank you.
What keeps me going
Yeah.
is the smiles on the families' faces when they open their front door for the first time and they move into their new home. There is no better feeling than that. And that's
Exactly.
why we work tirelessly and year over year over year to do this work, because it matters.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. This was a great panel. And Secretary, as we are here, I realized like we have all our panelists, but you are females. So at the next one, we gotta bring Joe Garland, Frank Shea also to participate of the conversation.
Very
It wasn't
fair.
planned, it just happened like that.
Worked out well.
But thank you all for participating. Truly appreciate the contributions. There have been several questions posted in the chat and the conversation on Facebook. The team of the Lieutenant Governor's office has been replying to those questions as best as they can. Those that didn't get an answer, we're gonna make sure that we provide those questions to the panelists so you can get an answer to those questions. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, panel.